Breaking right now, GB News in turmoil after a shocking on-air meltdown by one of its presenters, and now a former host on the station suing the broadcaster for racism. I'm going to take you through this whole story because it's a complicated one. Amankona, very nice guy. He is a conservative who runs an anti-racism organization. And in fact, I'm friends with the guy. Actually, I put him on GB News before anyone else. I remember saying to him during his first appearance, I could see you being Prime Minister one day. He's incredibly talented. But he is on the left of the Conservative Party. He's on the side of the Conservative Party that is much more like the Lib Dems, doesn't like Suella Braverman, etc., etc. And he was one of the main presenters on their main Saturday night show, The Saturday Five, where during a discussion hosted by the now departed Darren Grimes, he accused the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, of being a racist and a bigot. Watch.
What's the matter, Albie? You always tell us that the Conservative Party is a broad church. Is it not broad enough to have Suella in?
No, it's not broad enough to have Suella in. She is divisive. I believe she is actually racist and a thoroughly bigoted woman.
Is she
and
racist
people like that should not be in the Conservative Party.
So I just wonder if the problem is that Suella is speaking to...
we absolutely have to strongly deny that Suella Braverman is racist.
She said British Pakistani men had a problem with grooming. She basically said...
That's your
opinion. She basically said
that child
grooming was a problem of the British Pakistani community. That is a racist comment.
That is your
and many Pakistani people in this country thought it was a racist comment, and I agree with
you cannot sit on this show and call someone a racist. You absolutely
cannot do that.
Now, what happened after that broadcast is what's most fascinating. Suella Braverman complained to the station, and Amankona was given an ultimatum. You either apologise or you're out. You're sacked. He refused to apologise, so he was gone. Now, if you know how I feel about Suella Braverman, you'll be very well aware that I think this woman is anything but a racist and a bigot. I absolutely believe that she was on the right side of history when it came to the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. However, GB News claims that it is the free speech channel. It claims that it's a place where these types of debates are allowed to happen. And indeed, I know there were many times on my former show when there were guests who would quite rightly describe Diane Abbott, for example, Jeremy Corbyn, for example, Humza Useless, for example, as bigoted and racist. And I actually think the station has to stand by its free speech claims and actually say, no, we can have this type of robust debate. And Suella Braverman, let's be honest, you're not going to sue us, okay? It wasn't a good thing, but I think these knee-jerk reactions of constantly sacking people just go against everything that the station was meant to be about. And of course, Amankona, he's not taking this lying down, revealing today on X, today I'm speaking out for the first time since leaving GB News. Thank you to everyone who is supporting my legal action against the so-called home of free speech. Look at what others on that channel have said and how they've been treated. Then look at what I said and how I was treated. The difference is like night and day. If you claim to stand for freedom of speech, fairness and equal treatment, you should be held to your word. GB News must be held accountable. And he released this video where he does produce the receipts of a right-wing guest describing a left-winger as bigoted and racist where no action was taken. Watch. If you're enjoying what we're doing here on Outspoken, please consider joining our thriving community over on Substack, www.outspoken.live. You can sign up completely for free, but Substack is so important to me. It is a free speech platform. It protects me from big tech cancellation. Plus, you get to communicate directly with me. Head on over www.outspoken.live, enter your email address, and sign up today.
Former GB News host who was sacked for calling someone I believe to be racist a racist. I started at GB News because it was edgy, it was all about free speech, it was about doing things differently. But the more and more I started working there, I felt like I was confronted with just the most awful opinions, things that were undeniably racist, homophobic, just downright bigoted. And then when I called Suella Braverman racist and a thoroughly bigoted woman, I was dropped.
I believe she is actually racist and a thoroughly bigoted woman.
There are former colleagues of mine who are white, like Carol Malone, who have said similar things, like calling Diane Abbott a bigot.
She is a bigot. She is what a bigot looks like.
And they still remain at the channel with no sort of reprimand whatsoever. I'm taking the fight to GB News through an employment tribunal. They need to be held to account for the way that they treat their employees. They need to be held to account for the way that they treat their black on-air members of staff differently to their white on-air members of staff. And they need to be held to account for the way that they report the news.
Now, as you can imagine, Albie Amankona's action against GB News has divided the right. The stark naked brief posted on X, "You really couldn't make this stuff up." A former presenter is now suing GB News for unfair dismissal, further accusing the channel of racism. His name is Albie Amankona. He claims he was sacked after calling Suella Braverman racist after she pointed out the disproportionate number of Pakistani men involved in grooming gangs. Of course, the irony is this was confirmed by Baroness Casey's audit released just days ago. So the guy fails to do his research, arguably slanders someone by result, and then cries racism. Perhaps there's more of an argument for him being negligent and or incompetent than anything else. Might come as little surprise that Joe Mann's Good Law Project is helping Amankona. We need more presenters willing to face uncomfortable truths, not less. So to my superstar panel, Suzanne Evans, who is a regular contributor to GB News, and Alex Phillips, who alongside yours truly was a launch presenter at the Free Speech channel. So I can see both sides of this, Alex Phillips. I do want to say, though, I really like Albie Amankona, and I loved having him on my show. I never agreed with him, and we had some real ding-dongs. I remember he'd often go head-to-head with Father Calvin Robinson. He's certainly on the other side of the conservative movement than I am. But I really worry about GB News just sacking people because they say something that goes against the ideology of the channel. I mean, that is not a free speech channel, is it?
Well, that's what he says that they've done. He says that they've sacked him because of that. I mean, we don't know, do we? Look, I have encountered Albie. He's one of those people that he went through a period of his life where he seemed to want to quote tweet everything I did because my ex-following is far bigger than his and accuse me of being racist every 5 seconds. I find him quite a nasty little young man, if I'm honest with you. He's one of those people who will point the finger and shout racist, racist, racist against other people, which is a very unpleasant, nasty, demeaning, personal slight. It is not a word that can be thrown about lightly. And so I don't find myself, having much sympathy for him at all. I think it's rather poetic justice considering, what I've had to suffer at that man's hands. I mean, I've got a thick skin and I don't care, but he was a bit of an irritant to me for a period of time and unnecessarily so, because I would raise issues such as women's safety when it comes to men from foreign countries. And he'd try and silence me and censor me and attack me. So no, he's not a fan of free speech himself. And the fact that he's going to Jolyon Maugham for his representation tells you everything you need to know. Good luck, I'd say. I'm sure that he's after getting some form of a payout, and I wouldn't be surprised if GB News give that to him because it's far easier, quicker and cheaper just to throw some money at a situation than end up being dragged through a tribunal. But, this is politics, this is life. I would imagine as well motivating GB News' choice, and I don't know, is that I'm sure Albie Amankona was about as popular with the audience as a bucket of sick. And they decided actually that the audience didn't like him, that he was being a bit of a pain in the neck, and this was an opportunity to say thank you for your services and goodbye.
Well, what's interesting, Suzanne Evans, is GB News are saying they are going to fight this hard. A spokesperson telling the Daily Telegraph Mr. Amankona's claim is misconceived, without merit, and being robustly defended. As the claim is ongoing, we do not propose to comment further. So it does look like this is going to get to court, or the tribunal at least.
It's very interesting. I must admit, when I heard this story, I thought, well, that's interesting because actually several members of the Saturday 5 panel were let go. The program's had a complete new refresh, including with a different presenter. So Garen Grimes is no longer presenting it. So obviously, if this is going to go to law, it's going to go to law. I think that is the thing with employment tribunals. Sometimes people will settle rather than go through the expensive process. So we'll see whether GB News does stick to its guns. But, I'm obviously a great supporter of GB News. I love contributing to it. I love watching it. But one thing I will say is when I am contributing is I am always very mindful that Ofcom is breathing down its neck. Again, we have a double standard here. I think Ofcom watches GB News much more closely than it does some of the other channels. There is a lobby group out there that is determined to have GB News taken on air and will write thousands of letters at the tiniest little hint of any kind of breach of the rules. So as a contributor, I'm always very conscious that I don't say anything that is, if you like, too outrageous. I do like to speak my mind, and of course it's free speech and all the rest of it, which I passionately support. But I think if you are contributing to a television programme, you have to be a little bit careful, because it's not like having a conversation in the pub. You are broadcasting, and it's often live to an audience, and there are certain rules which journalists have to obey.
Don't I know it? Don't I know it, Suzanne Evans? Yes. But
I would never, ever go on GB News and call somebody a racist or a bigot, because that is just, frankly, if you're a responsible contributor to a TV channel, that's a very stupid thing to do. And it's basically going to land the channel in massive amounts of hot water.
Yeah.
And that's
But so maybe GB News, though, just has to be honest and not keep saying that it is a free speech platform, because it's clearly not. Now, you can say that's because it has to operate within the confines of Ofcom, the Ofcommunists, as I call it.
I'm not a free speech absolutist. I don't believe you can go out there and say anything you like. Free speech is very important and must be protected, but there are legal limits. And to call somebody, to make an allegation about somebody, which I believe in Suella Braverman's case is demonstrably not true, then that is wrong.
Yeah. And of course, she could have sued Amankona. That could have been her way of dealing with it. Look, GB News isn't doing itself any favours, though, because lots of those issues that Alex and I had to deal with in those early days, 4 years in, are still ongoing. And it's brilliant home and security editor Mark White, a guy who I actually have a huge amount of respect of. We had run-ins when he was at Sly News. He wasn't very nice about me, it's fair to say. But when he came to GB News, we put those to one side, and I actually think he's a thoroughly decent man and one of the best that they have at that channel. But unfortunately, he's just constantly being let down by the technology and the production teams, and it exploded on air last night when he was doing breaking news in regards to the Iranian strike on the US airbase in Qatari territory. And oh my goodness, I'm not blaming him, but it was quite a meltdown. Watch this. But first, the great thing about having you here on Outspoken is that you're awake to the massive problems with the mainstream media and the disturbing reality that it's impossible to trust the fact checkers who try and dictate the narrative. Now, given we love the news and want to be informed, but no longer believe so much of what the establishment gatekeepers tell us, it can leave us in quite a predicament, right? But I've got the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. I have it on my phone and in my bookmarks online because it's become so essential to my daily life. You can see for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. I've got a huge discount, which I'm going to tell you about in one moment. But first, I actually want to show you what this incredible website and app is all about. So we're going to use a story of the incarceration of the UK's political prisoner, the grieving mother and housewife Lucy Connolly. You know how passionate I am about the story. She remains behind bars after one tweet had her appeal rejected and is now being treated appallingly in prison. You can see clearly in one place 37 sources covering the story. But what Ground News does is instantly show how it's being covered by the media, broken down by whether the institutions lean to the left or right. This is called the bias distribution chart. There it is. Then if you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. Interestingly and promisingly in this case, 32% of the sources are independent, which means I'm going to trust those ones much more. Now, the left covered the story very predictably. Wales Online flagged her racial hatred. The Daily Mirror went full-on political propaganda with the headline, Tory councillor's wife jailed for tweeting set fires to hotel, loses appeal bid. But the coverage on the right-leaning outfit's far more accurate. Guido Fawkes tapped into the horror of Starmer backing the 31-month sentence for one tweet. The Daily Express saying her incarceration is a moral stain on British justice. And The Spectator saying simply she's in prison because of her politics. They also carried Alison Pearson and the Daily Telegraph speaking to Lucy from behind bars. Now, my favourite feature is the Ground News blind spot feed. That services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. Go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code to subscribe today. And check this out, you will get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access. So that's ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Launched against the US bases in Iraq and in Qatar. I don't know, can they take my face off the screen while I'm trying to read all this just now, please?
Yeah. And we're hearing also, Mark White, that air raid sirens are now sounding at US bases in Kuwait, in Iraq and Bahrain. Now, that may just be a precautionary measure in some of those nations, or you may find that this is a triple-pronged attack, a situation of heightened panic across the whole area. Mark White, information is coming in quickly. Just to repeat, that is the biggest US naval base in the entire region, with the capacity to host 10,000 US troops, as well as over 100 aircraft, strategic bombers and tankers. So the potential there, Mark White, to inflict huge damage, and something that the White House, we believe, are convening meeting as we speak, as you'd imagine, Mark White, having a crisis meeting about what to do in return, what to do next.
Yes, no, absolutely. They will be meeting in the Situation Room now to try to establish exactly what their response to this should be, Martin. As I say, it's all going to be based on the calculation in terms of how successful their own defences have been in actually trying to take down the systems, the air, the missiles and the like that have been sent over from Iran. And what we're trying to establish as well is whether this...
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been told to wrap.
OK, Mark White, thank you for bringing us up to date. That concludes my input on the Martin Dorman Show. Handing over now to Michelle Dewberry. Of course, Jubes & Co. is up next, and I'll be back at 7 p.m. The situation in Iran is escalating. Let's hand over now to Michelle Dewberry, Jubes & Co.
Martin. Gracious me, ladies and gents, an awful lot has happened since we last spoke on Friday. We thought it might happen. We thought we might have 2 weeks, actually. America was saying that that's what they were going to give Iran. Turns out that was not the case at all. Of course, you'll know by now that we saw those strikes then from America over the weekend. $1 million question was always going to be, what on earth was Iran going to do back in response? The even bigger question.
Oh, God. I think one of the issues with GB News, right, is that a lot of the people who work behind the scenes, especially the production guys, actually hate everything GB News is about. So I think they were actually doing that thing. I'm sure they did it a few times to me, to be totally honest, where it was like, no, we're going to leave you on screen, Mark White. We're going to try and humiliate you. And then we're actually going to leave your microphone on as you're ranting to us. Because I don't know if you heard at the end, but Mark White was very angry. Just watch again.
Last spoke on Friday. We thought it might happen. We thought we might have 2 weeks, actually. America was saying that that's what they were going to give Iran. Turns out that was not the case at all. Of course, you'll know by now that we saw those strikes then from America over the weekend. $1 million question was always going to be, what on earth was Iran going to do back in response?
Alex Phillips, we have both been there. I have to say, I'm Team Mark White all the way on this. I'm Team Mark White.
I love Mark White. He was one of my favourites. I love that man to the bone. He's so much fun and he's such a brilliant, capable journalist. That looks like a man who doesn't really want to be working for that company much anymore, if I'm honest with you. But I do remember the wonderful Jill Penlington, who was, the exec producer when we launched on GB News. I remember her sort of main mantra was always, you're never alone with a microphone, i.e. make sure that you've taken that thing off and it's turned off and it's nowhere near you if you're going to say something that you don't want to be on air. But I love Mark White. That poor man looked so fed up.
Yeah, I was totally team Mark White there. I'm like, take the guy off camera, turn his microphone off when he's trying to have a rant. And God, just sort it out. Seriously, just sort it out. You're 4 years in and you're still amateur when it comes to the technology, and you let down great people like Mark White on air. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.